this offseason, like to open up my phone and be like, oh, a happy King story. So Saturday morning, having some coffee. Oh, what's going on social media? I'm a little tired from wine tasting. Let's see what's going on. And I see everyone in King's social media freaking out about Sasha Vezenkov. A couple of reports out there, none from an NBA reporter or anybody locally, but two conflicting reports. The first one from Matteo Andriani from basketinside.com. He reported that Sasha Vezenkov has been informed that he's not in the Sacramento Kings plans for next season.
Okay.
He says that Sasha's priority is to stay in the NBA and that the Kings will try to trade him.
Oh.
But then we had another report from Eurohoops.net. The reporter Mihalis Stefanou
You're doing great.
tweeted, Sasha Vezenkov has informed Sacramento that he doesn't intend to return for a second year of his contract. For now, it's open whether he will continue his career in the NBA or he will decide to return to Europe.
Ooh.
Okay.
Ooh.
All right. I don't know what to make of all of this. We have not heard anything else besides this. Sasha Vezenkov did sign a 3-year, $20 million deal last
The railgun is
offseason
hitting
with the
thrusters properly. Man, you moved the Devastator. We're clear.
To the skies!
Okay, all clear.
Sacramento Kings playoff team. I'll play a decent role. And his role was beyond inconsistent last year, right? His minutes were inconsistent.
Yep.
He dealt with injuries, and it felt like he never found a rhythm in the NBA.
Yeah. I mean, where do you really go with this, right? Like, what do you want me to say? It's like he wasn't adding a lot to this squad necessarily, but he also didn't have the trust from Mike Brown. So like, how long do you give this a go? Especially then when we talk on the other side of our mouths and we talk about how you got to make sure you're putting the right pieces around De'Aaron and Sabonis in their prime. So, I mean, what do you want me to say? He's a really nice guy. I was really excited about what he could possibly do in the NBA when he first came here, mostly because of how the team talked about him, how teammates talked about him. I never felt like it was fake when they were like hyping him up. Like the way that they would talk about his shot and just how beautiful it was, it's like, oh, it's pure. They love what they see. But that doesn't mean all of the instinct, the feel, the conditioning is always just going to translate into the NBA. And is it a miss? I mean, right now you're feeling like it.
I think it's a significant miss. I mean, look, I was excited for him. I thought this was going to be, to me, a no-brainer for the Kings.
For sure.
I was like, dude, bare minimum, he's going to be a good rotational player for this team because he's able to shoot. He moves well without the ball.
Smart player. Yep.
I know there were questions about him defensively, but I thought he even did some good things defensively of team defensive concepts. Could get his hand on the ball every once in a while, but also he would get targeted some, no doubt about it. So he ends up playing 42 games with the Kings last year, but he played a total of 511 minutes. He averaged 5 points a game, 2.3 rebounds, and 12.2 minutes per game. Shot 44% from the field, 37.5% from three-point range. He had the 2 ankle injuries. The first one kept him out a couple of weeks. Then he had that grade 3 one that kept him out 7 weeks. And it seemed like he was maybe turning the corner, and then something like that would happen.
Yeah.
And that was a huge setback for him. But my point is, the guy played 511 minutes. I don't know. Like, what you just said is so accurate. I'm like, is he a good player in the NBA? I don't know, because I don't feel like he got a legit shot.
For sure.
I never felt like, and it really felt like a lot of those guys in the back half of the rotation, they would be on such a short leash.
For sure.
By Mike Brown. And that's not to say like Sasha doesn't have limitations, but I'm left going, I don't know. I felt like he was good enough to help a team in the NBA, and maybe I'm just missing something. Maybe he is just not good enough from an athletic standpoint and defensively to hang at this level. But when he came in,
Why are you
was there
yelling at
not
me?
life in the building? No, but there was life in the building a little bit. So I'm a little perplexed right now. And maybe this is the reality. It's like, look, sometimes you make moves like this thinking it's going to work out, and it's just not good for either side.
Deuce, this happens on every team in the NBA. But here's the issue. When it's an organization in a small market like the Sacramento Kings and a team that has seen so much trauma and bad basketball over so many years and then finally felt like they were going in the right direction, when there's misses. It's not like if he was just the miss of the season, it would be like, oh, but it was the miss of Sasha and then Harrison not living up to what we were hoping that he could even be after re-signing a deal. And then it was, the entire
JaVale
team.
McGee, Duarte,
you go,
those moves.
you can go down the line. Yes. So that's why when you say like he brought life and something else to the building, yes, I think it was also just as people that cover the Sacramento Kings, and I think you could say this for a lot of our media within this market, was that like everyone saw this glimmer of hope because no one ultimately was watching Sasha Vezenkov night in and night out, but they had seen full games, absolutely. But you weren't watching him night in and night out for seasons and seasons being like, this is the guy that his game's going to translate into the NBA. Oh my gosh, this is going to be perfect.
Here's the thing. You also saw how hard they were going after him. Like, they make the trade to acquire his rights.
Yeah,
You're
they
like, "Oh, he's gonna
believed.
come over." Yeah.
So-
my point though, that what surprises me about it though, of why, like, I was just more surprised he didn't get more of a legit shot, a legit run, because dude, they sent executives over. Mike Brown went over.
How are you
They had a
supposed-
full court press on this guy, and then it's like, okay, he got
How
a
are
little
you-
bit of a chance.
How are you supposed to give this guy a shot when he's also like suffering grade
Sure.
3 ankle sprains?
But there were opportunities before that
There
where he was
were.
out of the rotation, where like, ah, man, he makes one mistake, it's like he's out, and it's like, well, let this guy. You guys said this.
You say this, but like some coaches just have different standards of what the shit they want out there.
I understand that, but we can also be critical of decisions coaches make at times. And it felt like, not just with Sasha, that at times that those guys didn't have the same leash. And I'm not saying like, hey man, you can fight, but sometimes as a player, you need to fight through struggles. He's new to this league. He's got to figure it out. Like, if he's going to make it in the NBA, it's not because he makes one mistake and he sits on the bench and thinks about it. Some guys have to go out there and go, all right, let me get another shot at this and see how I do.
How many times did Davion Mitchell have such a short leash, especially throughout the beginning of the season, and then he didn't let it get to him and he kept fighting through, and kept seeing few different opportunities. And then, of course, here arrives Keon Ellis and to take even more of his minutes, but he never like hung his head. If anything, it just like lit this fire under him to keep like finding that way to gain that trust and make sure that he was dominating in the minutes that he was receiving.
Sure.
And
But
I
what
think
changed too, though? Like, if we're going to play that, going with Davion Mitchell, we can talk about, well, he got more of a chance. One, he was hitting the shots for sure. He started to hit shots more, right?
But yeah, within his opportunities.
Sure. But then Kevin Huerter got hurt and Malik Monk got hurt. And
For
when
sure.
those two guys got hurt, they needed another guard to come in and handle. Like, they're almost forced to play him more, is my point. They had to,
But
based
that's
on.
always, that is the NBA. The NBA is so situational and it's so like, how are you going to grab that opportunity? And sometimes your opportunity is 5 minutes in a game. And if you don't do every single little thing that a coach or a system might want you to do, it might be like, we don't have time for that shit. And I don't necessarily think that's the right way to coach. I have definitely been coached like that. And yes, if anything, it can really screw
Right.
with your
And so-
confidence and do so many other things to you. But it can also try and trigger and
Sure.
flick something and
But guess what?
Make it go.
Guess what, Morgan? And we
What?
talked about this too with Davion. When you're playing 2 minutes and then, hey, Fox is going back in. That's hard to get in a rhythm.
Wait,
Some of these
yeah,
guys need
I
rhythm.
get that.
You need some time to cook a little bit. And I didn't feel like Davion too, but Sasha at times didn't get enough time to go out there and cook. And I think if you're investing in him, you put the time and resources into someone, giving them more of a legit opportunity would have been nice to see. And I'm not even saying it would have worked out, but I'm left looking at this Sasha situation going, I don't know what to make of 511 minutes. Yes, some of that was due to injury. Acknowledged. But there was also times he just wasn't playing.
Right now, what we are witnessing in the postseason and now with the NBA Finals, like I think with some of these players is elite defense, and not even just team defense, just as individuals. I mean, you can go down the line of freaking Celtics roster.
Sure.
You just pick one guy and you go, oh, his on-ball defense and what a crazy blah blah blah. Not everyone's going to be a Drew Holiday. We get that, but like, I think the importance of being able to not be a liability on one end or and then
That's fair. I mean,
but if you are a liability on one end or the other, you better be goddamn elite on something, doing something just so great that like there's no excuse to not have you out there. It was going to be his shooting. And then when it wasn't his shooting and it wasn't his offense necessarily, even in his sliver of time that he was out there before any time he was injured, it's like, okay,
Yeah,
we don't have time for this.
I think looking back, it had to do with the defense.
Yeah.
And the reality is, like, I'm sorry.
It screws with
but
everything.
I understand that, but Kings, didn't you? You knew what you were getting at Sasha. You weren't getting like some crazy supreme athlete that was going to be able to defend multiple positions. And you're right. The point you bring up about what we see in the playoffs, players like Sasha end up getting played off the floor because
Correct.
because come playoff time, they're going at your weakest defender.
Yep.
Okay, they are going at him nonstop, and so you have to have the ability to move laterally, rebound, contest shots, and I think that's what hurt him most this year is Mike Brown's emphasis was so much on like, we have to be better defensively. We have to take a step, that he was not tolerating any missteps on that end.
I think when you're trying to court the EuroLeague MVP under 30 years old, it's a low risk situation, especially with the contract that it is, having the team option in the third year. Like, I mean, sometimes you're going to swing and miss. And I think there's going to be so many people that come after me and go like, but you can't do that. It's like, okay, I get it. Sorry, that's just reality. Like, it's going to happen. And sometimes it can cost you your job if you're someone in the front office. And other times you also get a longer leash to be like, oh shit, it just didn't work. And so we got to make sure we're making the right decisions and moves this next season.
Yeah, the reality is the deal that they signed with Sasha is not something that's going to crush you for years to come. And now we also have to acknowledge this as we kind of reflect on Sasha's year, is re-emphasizing like, these are the reports that are out there. I don't know.
He could be on the roster next year. And
he might be. And that's the one report that was mentioned earlier. Was like, oh, he's not going to come back for year 2. He's under contract. So, yeah, he's going to be there if he's not traded, right? And so the Kings do have some options here. I think, one, like, he's an expiring contract technically. So there are teams who would look to trade for him. And I think some people are like, well, what's his value? I don't know. I mean, I think you'd probably make him part of a larger trade package than anything. Otherwise, I mean, to me, it's like a second-round pick.
And what I will say as well, and I think somebody will be like, oh my God, you're so soft, whatever you're going to complain about.
I have no idea what you just said.
Oh my God, you're so soft. Like, someone's going to say that about me when I say this. Like, he's such a nice guy and a good teammate. And all the times that you just see this guy rooting everyone on, even when he wasn't getting the EuroLeague MVP, not seeing the floor, not getting his playing time, cheering for people,
moving
excited
all the way around the world to come to Sacramento.
But like, just as a teammate, I'm saying just what he was doing on the sidelines and everything else. And I just think like if anything, it was great actually, or it is great to have a player around that has that type of personality, and it has the ability to remain professional and everything. So wherever this ends up going with him, I'm just glad that like we've experienced a good human in all of this.
Well, that's really sweet of you, Morgan.
I know people are gonna be like, "Oh my God, how dare you say that?"
So the options are pretty simple, right? They could trade him. Like if they've gotten to a point where it's like, you know, we tried this, didn't work out. We're gonna look to find you a new home. You could do that. Waiving him doesn't make much sense, right? Because although the final year is a team option, you're just going to eat that money. It doesn't seem realistic. Stupid. Now they could use a stretch provision, which allows you in this circumstance, you'd be able to waive Sasha and then stretch his money out over 3 years. So you'd pay him like $2.2 million per year. And it wouldn't just, it would help your cap situation, whatever. But I think
why wouldn't you just keep him on the roster though?
You could, but I think if I'm not advocating for the stretch provision, I'm just telling you the options. I would say and we don't know what's true or not, but like if the Kings are like, yeah, we don't really see you in our plans, Sasha's like, well, yeah, I didn't really like being here anyway, then you do what's right and you try to find a home for him in the NBA and give him another chance.
Sure. And
then he can decide after that if he wants to go back after this season or not.
Okay. Well, I mean, either way, I think in some ways, I think it's the off season. You see this come out about the Kings. You want to shoot the shit and talk about it, right? At the same time, I think it's a little premature to talk about something like this when we're not seeing other reports locally come out as well.
I think we did a fair job talking about this. I think the reality is we're just talking about his season as a whole and why we don't think it maybe worked out. Like what was the reason why he wasn't playing? The reality is he's probably not happy.
Yeah.
Would you be thrilled if you moved for this opportunity in the NBA and you're not playing? Even if you're a good teammate and a nice guy, you would be a little bummed by it, and you'd be like, man, I want to play. Especially when, like you said this, Morgan, the guy's a EuroLeague MVP.
He's a competitor. No,
I want to play basketball. That's what he loves.
I make a joke about like doing a little money sign because I'm like,
and he makes money over there.
But I guess that's the thing. I can't ever imagine making millions of dollars. So like, I'd be smiling from ear to ear. I would be like paying off my shit and like having a good life. But as a professional basketball player and being a competitor and seeing that money before, yes, I completely
that's
understand.
The point. It's not like we're sitting here going, hey, it's confirmed because Eurohoops.net and what was the other one?
BasketInside.com.
BasketInside.com said it. I don't know. I mean, I know nothing about those guys.
I know.
And I'm not freaking out. Was I coming across like I was freaking out about this?
No, not at all.
How was I coming across?
Well, okay. You weren't coming across as anything, but here's my other question too. If we were to go down like rosters throughout the year, could you point out what guys you were excited about and then didn't turn out the way that you wanted them to turn out? I mean, Sasha, throughout the years.
If you go back and watch me talk about Sasha on previous clips, I look really stupid based on the fact that it didn't lead to anything this year. I thought he was going to be a impactful bench player. I was talking to people at Summer League last year around the league, and I was like, because they're like, oh, how the Kings didn't do anything. I'm like, dude, just wait. And they're like, what? I'm like, Sasha Vezenkov. And they're like, what? I'm like, dude, EuroLeague MVP.
You don't know. You don't know.
The guy can shoot it. Lights out. He moves without the... He's perfect for this offense.
Yeah. Yeah. It's crazy to me because sometimes it's like how many times we talk about college players and their games not translating into the NBA and all these things. But it's also situational for so many different personalities.
He's going to get moved to San Antonio and be like some crucial piece for the Spurs. And be like, oh my God.
Him and Wemby are taking the team to the playoffs. Oh.
Can you believe that Sasha Wemby lob? It's amazing.
They don't even need Sasha to play defense because Wemby's protecting the rim.
Sasha wins the 3-point shootout. Or moves to Dallas. They get 2 EuroLeague MVPs.
No. And then they get 2. Then teams would have 2 guys that they could hunt out on defense. Come on. Get out.
Let us know in the comments what you think about this situation. What do you think the Kings should do? Why do you think Sasha maybe didn't live up to expectations? I don't know. Some people may have had a different expectations. Yeah. I think mine were a little high. Yeah. I even said at one point, I was like, Morgan, I mean, could he start in front of Harrison Barnes?
Well, you said that because
I acknowledged my bad takes.
But it is, but also it was what was being kind of pushed out there
Morgan,
in some ways.
You think I get swayed by that shit? We sat here and watched him in the EuroLeague playoffs.
Yeah. I mean,
I
know.
Swayed by his teammates saying he's got a quick release. That didn't sway. I mean, I got more excited. I was excited before it was even official. We were watching these games, and I'm like, dude, I think he could really help this team. He's got the size.
Watching his games gave me like this, oh, hell yeah, I'm excited for this player. Then hearing his teammates talk so highly about him, his shot, his game, the front office talk about him, those were the things that pushed me over the edge of like, all right, well, if they're seeing this shit at practice, then it must be good. And then like, obviously not getting to witness everything that they might have saw at practice. Kind of sucked. But
here's one last thing I'm gonna add.
What?
I can't believe we've been talking about this for this long. This is like, we're ridiculous.
Yeah, whatever. It's summer. It's fun.
No, I just he had a body of work overseas. And so I think it's not like he was this mystery man. Like we got to watch him.
Yeah.
He wasn't like a 20-year-old who, oh man, like I think
he dribble?
Like I think he can play basketball. And I think he
can.
could have a spot in the NBA. Like that's not a ridiculous take. It just didn't work out here. At this point.
At this point, I think even that's ridiculous to say because what would be so funny is then if he comes back next year and then he's like has a feel for the game. He's in the rotation.
I think the tough part though for Sacramento is just like from a team building perspective is like how they just need more athleticism.
Yep.
They need length, and you said it in these playoffs. It's like you see all these teams. It's like they've got multiple bodies that could throw around, switchable defenders.
They need more consistency too. Like it's just, I mean, having healthier bodies. Whether you're like a lot of these guys are banged up. Luka, Porzingis playing out there banged up, but they're in there. They are keeping an identity and consistency to what the team wants to do to see success. And so it's
now you're watching a lot of playoffs and finals and stuff. You see the great defensive teams.
Oh yeah.
Like, all right, Sasha on the perimeter scares me for sure.
As it should. As it should.
Team defense was bad at times.
But like how many times have I talked about this? And again, you have to perspective. One more thing. You have to remember where the Kings are defensively. It's not like they, over the years, have been able to get this guy on defense, and this guy, whatever. We've been able to talk about Mike Brown basically trying to cover up the flaws of some of the bad individual defenders. And I think as a coach, he's done a pretty good job. And I'll just say okay job of that. There was times
he took a big jump defensively.
That's what I'm saying. Like even when Kevin Huerter was out there at times when he was being hunted, getting taken to the basket, it was sad, whatever. But then you'd have these moments where like his flaws could be covered up because the rest of the defense was rotating great. And then talk about someone like Malik Monk taking a leap with his defense, even just being able to rotate, be in the right spot, and almost taking a charge. And then obviously the addition of Keon Ellis being able to be in the rotation and add that. You see the importance of that perimeter defense, that pressure, how important that is.
Okay, so for the people watching on YouTube, drop the comments below how you're feeling about this Sasha story, what's next for the Kings. And also, if you want to email or drop in the comments below, you can email deuceandmo@gmail.com or in the comments below. We're dropping a Kings mailbag this week. Send us your questions. We appreciate you guys. Hit the thumbs up and subscribe.
Deuce and Mo, Deuce and Mo, Deuce and Mo. They tell you what they know. Deuce and Mo. Deuce and Mo, Deuce and Mo, the podcast that you know.
It was a tough day for so many when we found out that the legendary Bill Walton passed away at the age of 71. It was also so cool to see the outpouring of love and the stories people had involving Bill Walton throughout the years. We're not just talking about inside the basketball world, outside the basketball world. The lives he touched
in such a positive way with the joy he brought to life, because he went through a lot, not only as an NBA player, but all the surgeries he had, the stuttering issue he overcame, and he turned into one of the most important people in basketball. But his life was so much bigger than basketball too. I grew up hating Bill Walton in the early 2000s. I'll never forget the 2002 Kings-Lakers series. And it just felt like, is he room for the Lakers? I was 13 years old. I didn't like him at all. And when he got hired by the Kings, like 2010, you're like, Bill Walton, what? But as I grew older, I just gained such an appreciation for this guy. And I feel so lucky that I had a chance to talk to him for close to an hour about the 2002 Kings-Lakers series. No one has heard this conversation publicly besides myself, but I felt like it was appropriate to share it because what it highlights is Bill Walton's joy for the game. His memories that flooded back talking about that series, the passion he had talking about those teams. And I felt like I got to share it with the people. This conversation took place during the pandemic, early pandemic, April 2020. And I had reached out to him because I was working on a project that we haven't finished yet with my guy, Jason Ross. And we were doing kind of an audio documentary looking back at the 2002 Kings playoff run. And I felt like I got to reach out to Bill Walton about this. And so I reached out to Bill thinking, oh, maybe I'll be able to catch up with him for a few minutes. And let me be clear, I reached out to him, but Bill Walton didn't know me. He treated me like he knew me. And I felt like he made so many people he interacted with feel important. I maybe asked him 5 questions in this entire conversation, and I just sat back and soaked up classic Bill Walton, who would turn a simple question into a 10-minute answer and weave in stories and quotes. You just sit back and you enjoy it. I feel so honored that I got that opportunity. So I wanted to share that with you. Bill Walton's memories of the 2002 Kings-Lakers series that he called so many of those games, and he had so many stories from that time. So enjoy it and rest in peace, Bill Walton.
There was a lot of animosity between the two teams, and they had played in the playoffs previous years, and of course that 2002 one was a significant moment. Could you feel that animosity from your vantage point when you were broadcasting those games?
I love competitive sports, and one of the reasons I love them the most is how fierce and intense and the level of animosity between the two teams. When the fate of the known world is on the line, in the balance, and the players, they show me that this matters to them. They show me that they care. And so when the Kings and the Lakers were going at it there in the early 2003 straight years, I mean, this was a franchise that had trouble. Only one NBA franchise title back in 1951. The champs beating the Knicks in 7 games after the Rochester Royals, though, they had Arnie Rison, Red Holtzman, Bob Davies, Bobby Wanzer, all friends of mine over the course of my life. Now, the long and winding, arduous road, the Kings end up in Sacramento, and they have to take on the mighty Lakers. The Lakers, not the most successful franchise, but the most popular franchise, the media capital, entertainment capital of so much of the world. And here they were. And what the Kings were able to do was absolutely spectacular. And I loved the trash talking, and I loved them going back and forth. I do not like participating in it myself. That was never my deal. I wanted to let my game do my talking for me. But as a broadcaster, as a fan, when they were going at it, it just tickled my heart, and it just fired me up. But I do not like it when it gets personal.
And it did get
one thing.
It did get personal at times, right?
I don't like denigrating the opposition. One of my heroes growing up was Wilt Chamberlain. And Wilt Chamberlain was basically Santa Claus. And in this magnificent, huge, towering presence of a physical being unmatched in history. And Wilt never had a bad thing to say publicly about anyone. Every time a new player would come in the league, Wilt would talk him up. Every time he's going up against a big rival, Wilt would talk him up. And then the game would start, and Wilt would go out and get 70 points on him. And then just walk off the court and say, yeah, I'm Wilt Chamberlain, and nobody else is. That's the kind of approach and dignified response that I always loved and appreciated. But as the game, as our culture changed and evolved over the years, and it became so much more personal, and the fans were so much involved, and how the pride and the credibility and the integrity that goes with being a great NBA franchise and team and going up in the playoffs here, and with the Lakers having some real personalities, Phil Jackson, Kobe, Shaq, the main guys out there, and here were the Sacramento Kings, who were coming up and had not had great success since coming in 1985 to Arco in Sacramento, other than the incredible victory by the Sacramento Kings over the Boston Celtics in 1986. The Celtics won trip there, and it was a remarkable game that night for Sacramento, but not for the Boston Celtics, where I was on that team. Didn't play very much, but I was still on the team. And when you're a member of the team, when you win, there's something for everybody. When you lose, there's nothing for anyone. But the way these two teams were building toward this incredible climatic confrontation in 2002, because they had played 3 straight years in the final. I mean, in the playoffs. In the first year, 2000, it was a 5. It was best of 5 in those days. It was home court the whole way through, and so 2-0 Lakers, 2-2. Coming into game 5, and then it was all Lakers in game 5. And the next year, it was another convincing victory for the Lakers, who were on their way to one of the great playoff runs ever, statistically the greatest, only 1 loss. And I believe that loss was to Sacramento. It was a 5-game. No, the Lakers swept Sacramento that year. But then coming into 2002, because the Sacramento Kings had made the brilliant trade to get Mike Bibby. Yes, Jason Williams was a hugely popular, very successful, tremendous guy and a fabulous basketball player. But to get Mike Bibby, wow, and that leads us right in to what Jeff Petrie meant to this remarkable run of glory for the Sacramento Kings. Because in Jeff's 11 years, 9 playoffs, 2 times executive of the year, he was there for this phenomenal run of brilliance, of excellence, of community involvement, and he did it in every way imaginable. He did it with the draft picks. Peja at 14. Turkoglu, he knew himself, number 16. Gerald Wallace, 25. Kevin Martin, way down the list as well, but he wasn't part of this 2002 team. Kevin Martin came later. And then the trades for Chris Webber, the trades for Mike Bibby, the trade for Doug Christie, and later on the trade for Brad Miller. And so the free agents, Vlading, Bobby Jackson, Scott Pollard, later on, Jim Jackson, and his ability, Jeff Petrie, to see the vision of having a team come together, to have the knowledge to hire Rick Adelman. Rick Adelman was there for 8 of those 11 years with Jeff Petrie. And Rick Adelman and Jeff Petrie went back to their early days together in Portland. And it's important to note that Rick Adelman, even though they had this incredibly fierce rivalry, Sacramento and the Lakers, Rick Adelman's from Los Angeles, and he grew up a Laker fan, and Jerry West was his favorite player, and Jerry West put all these teams together. Now, Jerry had to leave when Phil Jackson got there for the Lakers, but Jerry West has always been a Laker and will always be a Laker. And to have Rick Adelman have, as every young boy in Southern California from that era, grew up just idolizing Jerry West, and what a phenomenal, remarkable player, person he was. Ultimately, he became a better executive, a better front office executive than he was as a basketball player. And he's one of the greatest players ever to play the entire sport at every level, high school, college, pro, international, everywhere. So it was just fantastic. And so with Jeff Petrie able to put it all together, he had to have the support of ownership. And the Maloof family, fantastic, starting with Colleen, the mom, and Joe, and Gavin, and George, Philip, Adrian, the whole family was involved. And what the Maloofs did, they made it fun. They came from the entertainment business. They came from social enterprises. They came from community. They came from family, and and they extended that to their Sacramento Kings. And they made it such a remarkable destination of joy and hope and happiness. And Arco Arena was the place to be. The culture that they built, the scene out in front. I remember we'd be getting there, man, those fans in that parking lot. That was like the Great Fed parking lot. They were just so fired up and ready to go. There'd be bands out there and balloons and people all dressed up. They brought the cowbells. And then once they came inside, oh my gosh, the intensity, the ferocity, the tenacity, it was absolutely spectacular. That stuff doesn't just happen. That comes from the created culture, the culture that comes from the leadership, from the Maloofs, Jeff Petrie. And then you can never discount the impact that Pete Carrill had, because Pete was the college coach at Princeton for Jeff Petrie. Pete Carrill, a Hall of Famer himself, just an initiator of beautiful team basketball. And that's the game that Jeff Petrie played. That's what he learned. That's what he taught. That's what he built. And so with Pete Carril there on the sidelines at practice every day, because the separation that has to exist between what Jeff Petrie does, what the Maloofs do, and the executive side, that's different from what happens on the court. And you don't ever really want to cross that line, because ultimately the head coach, Rick Adelman, he has to have the ultimate say as to what goes on the court. And so you have this fabulous leadership team, the Maloofs, Jeff Petrie, Pete Carril, and the way that my career has evolved from being a basketball player, growing up in San Diego, going to UCLA, to being a member of the NBA for the Blazers and the Clippers and the Celtics, and then going into the broadcasting, and to be able to do all those different things and have it always keep coming back to Sacramento. Because the simple twist of fate has it that when I was coming back from my spine challenges and my near-death experience and life-changing experience with my spine, now 12 years ago, back in 2008 and 9, my first job back in broadcasting was with the Sacramento Kings, and how fortunate I was to be working with Jim Gray, with Grant, with the G-Man, with the Maloofs, and all the different people. Jeff Petrie was still there. It was fantastic. And so it was a tremendous situation for me and an opportunity. And now, as it all rolls into one and comes full circle, our third son is the head coach of the Sacramento Kings. So who would have ever thought? But if you put it all together and understand that the Walton family's ties to the Central Valley, my wife, Lori, is from Tracy. My dad is from Taft. We are Central Valley roots there. And to know and love the state of California as I do, and to be there on a constant basis, to be there with the Grateful Dead, to be there as the broadcaster, to be in Cal Expo, to be at the Armory with the Jerry Garcia Band, to be at the state capitol with all the different governors, to be in Sacramento for the Amgen Tour of California bike race, to be right there in the center of this most remarkable and incredible, spectacular, empty the thesaurus, to come in here and to see what is possible in the world. And now it is just coming back to the top of the mountain where it belongs. That franchise, appropriately named the Kings, at the top.
I love it. You fire me up, Bill. You called those games with Mike Breen and Steve Snapper Jones. I know it was a long time ago, but do you recall putting down the headset after some of those games going, I can't believe how good this series is?
I loved the way the Sacramento Kings played, and what a roster that they had, with Mike Bibby and Doug Christie in the backcourt, backed up by Bobby Jackson and Gerald Wallace. I mean, versatile, complementary, interchangeable, different contributions by each and every one of them. Mike Bibby, a big-time scorer. Doug Christie, an all-around player who loved to do all the dirty work. Bobby Jackson, a lead player. Bobby Jackson could do it all by himself. And then Gerald Wallace, just this diamond in the rough who was just being polished and all the dirt washed away on a constant basis. And then that front line of Chris Webber, Vlade, Peja, and Turkoglu, backed up by Scott Pollard and Lawrence Funderburk. Wow, what a team. What pieces. And, with Chris Webber, you had a Hall of Fame level player. Vlade is a Hall of Fame player. And Chris will get there eventually. And then Peja and Turkoglu were just those beautiful European players who knew how to play, who knew why you play, which was to win, which was to help the flow and the glow and the show. And then they could fill it up. Peja and Turkoglu were different. Peja was one of the purest shooters you'll ever see. Very much a shot very similar to Jeff Petrie's himself. And then Turkoglu, this complete unknown coming out of Turkey of all places. And to come from Turkey and have a first name like Turk Alou, oh my gosh, the harmonic convergences just keep flowing endlessly here. And then with Scott Pollard, a real personality in his own right, and able to come in as the sixth man in the front court and do what six men are supposed to do. When things are going well, keep it going. When things are not going well, change it up and restart the whole thing. And Scott Pollard, because of his skill level, because of his assets, his package of talent and his personality, Scott loved to mix it up. It was fantastic. And Scott Pollard and our oldest son, Adam Walton, went to high school together here in San Diego. And then Lawrence Funderburk, who was just coming into his own there. This was another guy who loved to mix it up with guys. And so the roster makeup on this Sacramento team was absolutely spectacular. And it was a destination. Arco, Sacramento, corporate jets flying in from all over the place to see these games. And the biggest challenge for teams as they come along as they're growing, as they're maturing, as they're working their way to the top, is to ultimately sell their own tickets. Because a lot of teams, all they can sell is the opponent. All they can sell is the attraction that's coming in that night. But the Sacramento Kings, boy, those guys, they could sell tickets because of the way they played, the speed. In 2002, they had the best record in the NBA. They were the second best scoring team in the entire NBA. They had such a beautiful style, identity, and culture, the three elements that go into making fans want to buy in and say, hey, I'm with those guys. All of them going wherever they're going. I mean, that's what the Grateful Dead had. That's what great basketball teams, that's what great companies have. That's what great bands have. That's what great anything have. Artists, performers, entertainers. They had that ability to draw the fans in. And we were just like sucked in by the biggest vacuum cleaner you've ever seen.
I want to go to Game 4. It was when Robert Horry hit the buzzer beater at the Staples Center. Kings had a big lead in that game. Of course, the Lakers don't go away. Champions keep fighting. But Shaq and Kobe miss shots. Vlade tips it out. Horry grabs it, hits the three-pointer at the buzzer. What do you remember about that sequence and the aftermath?
The series was seesaw all the way. The Lakers win the first game at Sacramento and take away home court advantage. Sacramento comes back and wins games 2 and 3, and they have a real chance of going up 3-1. Game 4 in Los Angeles. The world is watching. Sacramento has a 20-point lead in the first half. That lead shrivels a bit to 14 at the half, but Sacramento still firmly in control. Please remember that the only thing more meaningless than the partial score of an NBA game is the final score of an NBA exhibition game. And this was as serious as it gets. This is the trip to the NBA Finals, and the Lakers were going for historic, record-setting territory. They were already the two-time defending champs. They were going for 3. That's only been done by 3 different teams. Minneapolis did it in the very early days with all the Hall of Famers up, but the Lakers were still in Minnesota. The Celtics with Bill Russell, they won so many. Wow, who can even remember and count other than 11 out of 13? Unsurpassed forever. And then the Bulls, they won 3 in a row twice. So the Lakers, they've already won twice, and so there's a great opportunity for them to join the Lakers, Celtics, and the Bulls as one of the great historic runs in NBA history. And now Game 4, fate of the known world, on the line, in the balance. And what happens is that you really find out who's got a game as the series wear down. Because when you're playing the same team day after day after day, time after time, the plays, the strategy becomes irrelevant. It's who can play. And it comes back to that mantra. Players make plays. Plays don't make players. And Robert Horry, one of my favorite players of all time, remarkable sense of being in the right place at the right time. Robert Horry, growing up in the middle of nowhere in Alabama. Robert Horry getting drafted. Who would have ever thought? But the Houston Rockets. Robert Horry was a center in college at Alabama, playing for Wimp Sanderson. Robert Horry gets drafted by Rudy T, who already has Akeem to play center. Robert Horry, this little skinny, wiry guy, long, yes. Tall, yes. Full 6'9", 6'10". But Robert Horry turned out to be one of the most cerebral players in the history of basketball. He always knew where to be, and he was expert at teammate selection. So to go from playing with Akeem at the top of his game, one of the greatest players ever, greatest international player ever, but then to make the move and go over and team up with Shaq, because Robert Horry could get Akeem the ball, he could get Shaq the ball, and later on he went and got Tim Duncan and David Robinson the ball. And so that's what makes teams win. And Robert Horry happened to be at the right place at the right time. The ball came out. Vlade pushed it out, which was all he really could do. It just happened to go to somebody who was on the other team, who was in a perfect place and who has made that shot and many other shots many, many times before. At the end of the day, to win the big ones, to win it all, to win any game, your best players have to beat their best players. And so their best players were Shaq and Kobe, the Lakers, who had their ups and downs. Kobe was sick early on, but Shaq was fantastic throughout. And now, at the end of the day, Game 4 goes down to the bitter defeat for the Sacramento Kings, and it's a situation where it's tied 2-2. Kings still have home court, but they lost something there in Game 4. They lost that incredible level of confidence, that confidence of we're going to get this done, and that happens to every athlete when you give one away. Because when you have that big lead, it's very, very difficult on the road to have the huge lead early because the games are interminable. The other team is good. That's why it's a big game. The other team's got the crowd. The crowd's never going to get tired. And the Laker crowd brought it as that game wore on. And ultimately, it was a Laker victory. And the Kings apparently recovered, won game 5 at home at Arco, went down. They lose game 6. And then they come back for the fateful game 7. And the fateful game 7 is one that we'll never forget because I love pressure. I love it when we're at the moment of truth. I love it when we're at the moment before the moment of truth because that's where the preparation comes in. That's when you're in that locker room and you're sitting there and you're looking at all the guys and you can feel the building shaking. You can feel it trembling. You can feel the building being worried about the crowd tearing this old building down. And so that Arco crowd that day for game 7, man, I will never forget. They were there so early. They were so fired up. They wanted blood. They wanted Phil Jackson's blood. They wanted Shaq's blood. They wanted Kobe's blood. Oh my gosh. And then the team, it came out and just could not get the job done. It was very disappointing from the Kings' perspective. The Kings, they had their chances in a game that went to overtime, in a game where the Kings, out of 30 free throw attempts, missed almost half, missed 14 out of 30 free throw attempts. In a game that went to overtime. In a game that went to overtime, the Kings took 20 three-point shots, which by today's standards is nothing, which is, happens per quarter. But in those days, that was a lot of three-pointers. And of those 20 three-point attempts, only 2 of them went in. And one of the things that defines the difference between the champions and the team that doesn't get it done is that you have to be able to play your best at the very end and win a series, particularly, this was a great Laker team. They had Phil Jackson, who's got the records, who's got the championships, 11 championships, and 20 years of coaching. Just a spectacular resume. Some of the greatest players developed under his tutelage ever. He was also a member of 2 of the greatest NBA championship teams ever back with the Knicks in the early 1970s. But with Shaq and Kobe together, 2 of the handful of the greatest players ever, with Robert Horry. We haven't even talked today about Rick Fox. And you got Derek Fisher. You got a bench that was okay, but nothing that's going to make you stay awake at night saying, oh my gosh, we're going to be worried about Lindsey Hunter, Brian Shaw, Devin George, Mitch Richmond, and Mark Madsen, and then Samaki Walker, who made some big plays in the game 4 comeback for the Lakers. But this was Shaq and Kobe and 3 other really, really good players who were smart as could be, tough as could be, and were only concerned about winning. Derek Fisher, Robert Horry, and Rick Fox. And so for the Kings to have won that game 7, it was there, and yes, it went to overtime, but the Kings did not have the on-court leadership, did not have the peak performance on command that they needed. They did not have the one guy who was going to look at Shaq, Kobe, and Phil and say, you know what, we're taking this, because the crowd was there, and the crowd was ready. The crowd did their job. But the missed shots, the hesitation, the reluctance, the lack of assertiveness, the lack of saying to each other, we are going to get this done, follow me, get one guy. It could have been a lot of guys, but it comes down to a collective failure of getting the job done. And so at the end of the day, in the overtime, where basically anything could happen, Shaq, Kobe, and Derek Fisher, they combined to go 8 for 8 from the free throw line. And the remarkable statistical analysis of that 7-game series, all the stats were in favor of Sacramento. Field goal percentage, plus 3.5. These are all numbers on the entire series. 3.5 percentage points on field goal percentage. On 3 percentage, plus 3, Sacramento. Free throw attempts, plus 19 for Sacramento. Free throw percentage, minus 7 for Sacramento. That is a dagger. Please make your free throws. Offensive rebound. What are you going to do with Shaq? How are you going to keep him off the board? Vlade gave everything he had, but Sacramento gave up 24 offensive rebounds more than they were able to garner themselves in a 7-game series. And a lot of that can be directly attributed to the massive presence of Shaquille O'Neal. And then the passing game, the style that the Sacramento Kings utilize on a constant basis. I love passing. I love team. I love selflessness. Plus 14 assists for Sacramento over the Lakers over the course of the 7-game series. Lakers had more blocks, 7 for the entire series. That's only 1 a game. That's not a lot. And then the incredible, remarkable statistic of all is that only 2 points separated these two teams, these two great teams, from going to the NBA Finals. Now, when the Lakers ultimately won, Game 7 overtime victory, they go on and play the New Jersey Nets and they sweep them. So that's just the way it works out. But when only 2 points separate them, it was just an absolutely spectacular and close series that we will never, ever forget. One of the things about the Sacramento Kings in 2002 is that they really became the second team in NBA history that had a global presence. Today, that's just taken for granted because of what the NBA has become under David Stern and Adam Silver and all the international players that now dominate so much. But the first team that had an international presence were the Bulls. And in China, they were called the Red Ox, and because the translation just wasn't really working. But the Sacramento Kings with Vlade and Peja and Turkoglu, more importantly, though, their style, because that's the international style. That's the Pete Carril, that is the Serbian, that is the European game of passing, shooting, skill, movement, fast break, and running all the time. It was just an absolutely fantastic thing to witness and to be a part of. And I'm the luckiest guy in the world that I was there, and I will never forget.
I do want to go back to Game 6 for a second because a lot of fans feel this way, and I know some of the players did at the time. There was so much talk about the officiating in that game, and I know Sacramento people thought it went against them a little bit. Do you think that was overblown, and do you think that maybe impacted them? Maybe they got too distracted going into a Game 7?
Every team that loses always thinks it's someone else's fault, and that's what happens when you do lose. And when you're the champion, and you do lose, it's time to stand up and say, that's on me. I did not get the job done. And so when you have these incredible players who are so gifted physically and so powerful, and movement is everything, how are you going to defend Shaq? How are you going to defend Kobe? And to sit here today and complaining about the referees, I don't like it. I try not to do it. But I think back to the games that I was involved in as a player where I lost. And oh my gosh, that game at Notre Dame on January 19th, 1974. Not that I remember the date. Yeah, the referees at Notre Dame. O'Shanahan, Flannery, O'Sullivan, please give me a break.
That is too crazy. That just sticks with you. You mentioned a couple things about Game 7, the way the Kings played too. Do you think nerves impacted them in that situation? They had home court advantage. Many people thought that was going to be a big deal, but ultimately, you talked about the missed free throws, the missed threes. Those were kind of uncharacteristic for that squad. How much of that was nerves, do you think?
Nerves, pressure, anxiety, anxiousness, it all plays into it. It's what you live for. It's what you dream about as a player. It's what you want. You have to train yourself. I want to be in that position. Nobody wants to play in a game that doesn't matter. Everything mattered in this Game 7. And what happens when you have the big game? You need your coach is going to do his job. His job is to breathe life into everybody and to make them believe. And for the Sacramento Kings in Game 7, when they were so close and were unable to get it done, and the self-reflection, this brings us back to the notion of when things get tough, somebody has to step to the front and say, I'll take care of this. And that's on your best players. And where you just come out and you play so well. One of the things that you learn being the champion is that it is really, really, really hard. And you can't take anything for granted. Nothing's for certain. It can always go wrong. And you have to put everything you have, and you have to utilize every asset. And one of the great assets is that home court. That home court at Arco, that was as great as it's ever been. And when I think back to the Game 7 road victories in NBA history, I'm not sure this was the greatest by the Lakers, because I think back to 2 Game 7 NBA finals. 1969, Boston wins at LA in the Forum. Bill Russell, his last game, Sam Jones's last game. And they win on the road against Wilt and Elgin, Jerry, and all these remarkable players. And the other one was 1974, Boston at Milwaukee. Milwaukee has this incredible team of Lucius Allen and Oscar Robertson in the backcourt. Kareem in the middle, the best player I ever played against by far. Bobby Dandridge, an incredible, should be in the Hall of Fame forward player, just absolutely spectacular. So many road victories in that 74 NBA Finals series. And Boston comes in after losing a heartbreaker on their home court, which would have won them the title in Game 6. Losing at home, and then they go to Milwaukee, and everybody's thinking, well, come on, Kareem, Oscar, Lucius, Bobby Dandridge, Boston has no chance. Boston came out and won the game by 20 points. And so you just have to have those guys, that personality, who you are, what you stand for, what you're going to do, and when the moment of truth comes and that ball is in your hands, and how we're going to get this done. And when you don't get it done, you never forget. And it stays with you because this is our lives. This is what we live for. This is what we dream about. This is what we spend every waking moment preparing for, to have that chance. The tough part is that when you're young, you just think it's just going to keep going and you're always going to be right there. The older you get, the more elusive it is. And the challenge right now for our beloved Sacramento Kings is to get back into the big time game and have Golden One become just this radiant magnet of excellence. And the free agents and the draft picks and the trades are all coming in, and the place is packed, and the jets are flying in from all around the world to watch the Sacramento Kings going for their first championship in Sacramento, in the Golden State, at Golden One.
I hope that happens, Bill. I want to go back to something you said earlier, too. You talked about the Jay Will trade. They ended up getting Mike Bibby, and Bibby really emerged in that 2002 playoffs and, of course, in that Kings-Lakers series. What did he provide for that team? What did he do that kind of put them over the top in the West?
One of the hardest skills in basketball is to be a great one-on-one player, to be able to create your own shot. It sounds simple as can be. Everybody tries it, but only a few guys can really do it. Kareem could do it. Larry Bird could do it. Michael Jordan could do it. Shaq could get his own shot. Kobe ultimately could get his own shot. LeBron can get his own shot. But what Mike Bibby was able to bring to this team of guys who were more complementary type of players. I mean, Doug Christie, he wasn't going to get his own shot. Bobby Jackson, he could get his own shot on the days that he was on fire. But Bobby wasn't the type of player who did it every single game. He came with his best effort every game, but he didn't always deliver. He didn't always have it. Gerald Wallace was just getting started. Chris Webber, another guy who could get his own shot. Vlade against Shaq is not going to be able to get the type of shots that he normally would be able to get against other players. Shaq is just that good. Peja and Turkoglu were more off the ball type players. And so with Mike Bibby coming in and Jason Williams, as good as he was not a scorer. He was a guy who could create for the team to score, but he was not somebody who could just say, okay, give me the ball and get out of the way, and I'm going to either make a basket or I'm going to get to the free throw line. And Mike Bibby could do that. And that just elevated the Sacramento Kings to a whole nother level. Because over the course of the interminable NBA season, I mean, there's so much basketball and so many different things, and injuries and problems and off nights and fatigue and all the different stuff. If you have that guy who can just take the ball and go, and that guy is as durable and as tough and as creative and imaginative and still selfless as Mike Bibby, you've got a real chance to win it all. Injuries play a huge role in the outcome of history. No one knows that better than I do, having missed more than 9.5 full seasons of my 14-year NBA career. But it was heartbreaking in 2002. The Sacramento Kings, over the course of the year, were the best team in the NBA. But to have Peja Stojakovic go down with that ankle injury in the second round and miss significant portions of the second round, and then to miss the first 4 complete games of the Western Conference Finals, and really only played in 3 games, and in those 3 games was not able to be the Peja Stojakovic that I think belongs in the Basketball Hall of Fame, as just this magnificently beautiful, sculpted player who had such rhythm, who had such grace, who had such dignity, who had such class. And he was coming and he was playing in this beautiful existence. And it's all going well. And the Kings are on fire. And they're rolling. And they're about to be crowned. And then the simple twist of fate of an ankle turning over. And the wheel goes flat. And nobody can find a pump. Oh my, how sad. The breaks of the game. You never know. If only. If only.
So true. I think a lot of people miss that. Peja not playing and then coming back, missing that big shot in Game 7. That he was banged
Right.
up. I want to ask you, get your thoughts on Rick Adelman. I think he's one of the most underappreciated head coaches in our game. What made Rick such a good coach?
Rick Adelman was a classic example of what it takes to be an excellent NBA coach. He came up through the ranks. He was a part of expansion teams, San Diego, Portland. He was part of better teams later on. But mostly what he did was that he learned. He was a tough, hard-nosed competitor as a player, but he watched, he witnessed, he was exposed to lots of great leadership opportunities, styles, and different ways, different path forward to the promised land. And so Rick Adelman, when he got this team, he was perfect because the team had personality. What they didn't have was the structure and the level of consistency that it takes to be great. And he brought that. He brought that level of, guys, this is every day. How we do anything is how we do everything. We have a chance. We have a chance to make this really, really special. And when you're part of something special, your life is never the same again. And when you talk to any of these guys, and how much, and we talked to Mike Bibby, and Doug Christie, Bobby Jackson, all still involved. Chris Webber comes to all the games. Vlade, the president, the GM, and Peja right there with him. You talk to all these guys, and the dreams, the memories, the friendships, the bonds. It is so special, and that never happens without a great coach. There has never been a great player, a great team, a great company, a great organization that didn't have a great coach. Sacramento, we, the NBA, the world, basketball, incredibly fortunate that Rick Adelman was in the right place at the right time.
You were one of the best passing big men in NBA history, and at the time the Kings were clicking. Vlade and Weber were such gifted passers. What did that do for the offense to have not one but two bigs who could pass the way those two did?
What Vlade and Chris Webber did, their ability to play interchangeable double post, high, low, weak side, strong side, didn't matter. They were basketball players. Players make plays. Plays don't make players. And Vlade and Chris, they could do anything and everything with the ball. And they loved the show. They loved the game. They loved the spirit. And there's nothing better than when you're passing that ball around and the defense is just spinning around and they have no idea whatsoever where the ball is going. And both Chris and Vlade, with the behind the back passes, with the fake passes, with the incredible imagination and creativity, I just would have loved the opportunity to just dive, to be ejected right into their bloodstream and end up inside their brains and see what they were thinking and where they saw all these opportunities that nobody else could possibly see. And most importantly, they were willing passers. They loved it. And the way that would inspire the crowd, because the crowd knows it's all about the team. It's all about everybody being involved, and the values and the human characteristics and personal attributes that the players show and being part of a team. That's what the crowd lives in their own lives, and that's what they want to be a part of. And so when the rebound would come, whether it be Vlade or Chris or Christie or Pollard or any of these guys who get the rebound, because it was a team that was based on skill. They weren't a bunch of specialists. Yes, there were some aspects of their games that were better than others, but everybody could do everything. Everybody could shoot, everybody could pass, dribble, think, catch, and everybody wanted to win. Everybody had the ultimate goal, that collective sense of effort and purpose of why we're doing this, and that's to win the game. And so they did that beautifully, and the crowd just responded. And it was epic to be in Arco and to see the plays unfold from a defensive stop, a block, a rebound, a deflection, a steal, quickly into transition, up the court, cross the court, throw a lob, who knows, Weber throwing it down, Christie hitting threes, Bobby Jackson driving the lane, Peja and Turkoglu making spectacular step-back threes, Lawrence Funderburk coming alive there, Scott Pollard mixing it up inside, Mike Bibby taking control, and then Mike would go over and sit down and clip his fingernails during the timeouts. I couldn't believe it all, and I'm the luckiest guy in the world. I was there.
I want to ask you about Shaq because you know bigs better than anyone. What were the challenges of defending a player like Shaq, especially in the middle of his prime like that?
Shaq was one of the greatest players ever, who happened to be really, 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 really big. And that just created so many problems for anybody else. He changed the game. And there has not been a center that have impact like that since Shaq. That's how dominant and how impactful and important he was in the history of basketball. And then Vlade had the unenviable task of guarding Shaq. But that's the way it goes. And you have to figure out some way. I mean, I was super lucky in that I had brilliant coaches. 6 of my coaches are in the Basketball Hall of Fame. And my favorite player ever of all time was Bill Russell. And Bill Russell, he had to go up against Wilt. And they played 142 times. And Wilt had his best games ever against Bill Russell. Yet Bill Russell's teams were able to win. And so the challenge for Vlade, the challenge for anybody, and during this time, nobody could respond. Nobody could create that challenge. And what you ultimately have to do when you're playing against someone who is so overwhelmingly superior in terms of size and strength and power and everything is that you have to take that game away from him. And the best that I ever saw at that was Dave Cowens. Dave Cowens was at most 6'9", barely 6'9", but Dave Cowens, he could play ball. And this was at an era, Dave Cowens, early 1970s, when every center in the NBA was a Hall of Famer, and most of them were ultimately members of the NBA's all-time team. And that era was led by Wilt and Kareem. And Dave Cowens was the only player I ever saw who could take it directly to Wilt and Kareem. And his ability to get out in transition, to initiate offense with dribble handoffs, to get to the offensive glass, to space the floor, to set screens, to run and run and run to keep his opponent, Wilt or Kareem, out of the action and behind the play, that was critical to the Celtics' success as they won 2 championships in a glorious era of basketball. Should have been 3, but for the same injury or injury plague and problem that Peja Stojakovic suffered with his sprained ankle. John Havlicek in 1973, when they were cruising to yet another championship, John Havlicek, as great a player who's ever played, he separates his shoulder. He had to play one arm, and he just couldn't do that, and the Knicks were able to come back and win their second championship. So the challenge for Shaq, nobody was ever able to do it. But there was, Vlade was close, but he wasn't able to take, Vlade was not able to take the game away from Shaq. And one of the elements of being the leader, one of the elements of being the guy is that you have to make them play your game. You define the terms of the conflict. Grateful Dead sort of song. I'm going to tell you how it's going to be. And that is what I never saw really anybody able to do against Shaquille O'Neal. That's how good, that's how big, that's how strong, that's how tough he was.
Do you think that that Kings team is one of the best teams ever not to win a championship?
There are a lot of teams that were really, really good that did not win a championship. This Sacramento team, whoa, what a squad. So close. Because when you look back and you think of all the things they had going for them in their favor, to where you think to yourself, they can win. They could win. They should win. And then they don't. But that is really the story of life, of history. And that is why when you struggle, when you fail, when the ball goes the other way, when you don't get the job done, ultimately your test in life is to take the worst things that ever happened to you and ultimately make them into the best. Now, sadly, the Kings were not able to recover from that. And the injury next year in the playoffs for Chris Webber when he hurt his knee, Chris ultimately got traded 2.5 years after the 0-2 magnificent run. And the Kings, are still trying to get back into that spot. But the elements are still there. The fans are still there. Vivek is fantastic. Vlade, the brilliant genius, running the show in the front office. And now the players. The players have to come together. The players have to learn, listen from the coach, and they have to go out on the court and get the job done. Because talk is cheap and vision true. Let's go. We've seen it once. Once we've seen it, we know it can happen. Now we've got to make it happen.
What is one word you'd use to describe that 2002 Kings season? Obviously it was great, but it ultimately led to a disappointment. What's the one word you'd use to describe that season in 2002?
As you get older, your perspective changes, your sense of relativity changes, and your sense of what determines success. How do you measure that? And I played for a remarkable coach in college. His name was John Wooden. And he never talked about winning and losing, although we won at a record pace. Never mentioned winning or losing. He always talked about the effort to win. He always talked about doing your best. And then he would always look at us, and everything he said made no sense whatsoever when we were teenagers and playing for him. This was 50 years ago. Over the course of the next 50 years, everything he said came true. And the last and the final thing that he ever told us, time and time again, was success is the peace of mind that comes with the self-satisfaction of knowing that you did your best. I thought that was all nonsense. It wasn't until recently in my life that became crystal clear to me. I'm 67 years old right now. Coach Wooden was right. I'm the slowest learner that he's ever had. If these players can look back and say to themselves, we did our best. I have peace of mind. I have the self-satisfaction that we did our best. Generally, in my life, when I failed and when I haven't got the job done, I look back and I say, there's things I could have done better. And if I had been better, the outcome would have been different. And so I try to change my behavior. I try to work on my consistency, my proficiency, my efficiency. I try to work on every aspect of who I am and what I stand for, what I'm trying to do. And at the end of the day, now that I'm no longer physically competing, this body is broken, but I'm alive and I'm moving and I'm going for it still in other aspects. And it's much easier today to be able to say, I did my best. And I do have the peace of mind that comes from the self-satisfaction of knowing that's what I did, my best.
The modern day Kings, they're finally back to being or had already won a title before. So 5, but they were really just a complete team. And this is just kind of a stacked starting 5 altogether. Yeah, this was like a case study in great team building. Like they already had a really nice point guard in Jason Williams. That was a fan favorite, White Chocolate, known for just some of the most incredible passes you'll ever see. I think that elbow pass to Rafe LaFrentz in I think it was an all-star Rising Stars game. Didn't lead to anything, but even the fact that he could do that is insane. And they dealt him away for Mike Bibby, who was, good, not great, but he blossomed into a star in Sacramento. You had Doug Christie at shooting guard, one of the best perimeter defenders in the NBA. Peja, one of the most underrated players of all time. Yeah, Peja, this dude never gets brought up as an all-time shooter, but this dude had a strap. Shot 41.6% from 3 this season. You had Vlade Divac, who ran out the starting 5. He was 33 at this point, so still up there in age, but he made an all-star game the year prior, so he was still a solid player. And they also had a pretty good bench. Bobby Jackson, Hito Turkoglu, Scott Pollard. But I gotta say, that dude had the ugliest facial hair I've ever seen. I'm sorry to give a random shot at him, but that was just disgusting. Well, you're probably not wrong. I don't have a picture in front of me, but wow. Well, I'm just doing research for this video. I'm looking at pictures and stuff, and I gotta see that. I can ignore the, frosted tips in that era. That's fine. Like, Hito was rocking the early 2000s frosted tips. Yeah, I can ignore that. That's fine. It was the vibe at the time. But his facial hair in some of these photos, I'll put them on screen, just looked awful. I just had to mention that. Sorry, Scott, if you're watching.
I may have gone too far in a few places.
But either way, overall, solid starting 5, no weaknesses there, and they had a couple good players off the bench as well, so they had a legit contending team. Oh yeah, in 2002, boy, did they play like a contending team. 61-21 record, best in the league. I will say, the one thing I always remember from this team is this iconic picture of the entire team giving the middle finger in one of their team photos, and apparently David Stern just never forgot that picture, but we'll get back to that. Yeah, this team went 61-21, which doesn't seem like an insane record, but this was a stacked Western Conference. The early 2000s West was very competitive. To give you some context, the Utah Jazz were the 8th seed this year and they won 44 games. So 61-21, they were the only team to win 60 plus games. games, first in net rating, 5th in offensive rating, 5th in defensive rating. This was just an all-around solid team. They had no weaknesses on the roster.
Yeah, and they kind of played team ball in the ISO era.
Exactly.
You know, this was the era of guys like Kobe, ISO players like Stephon Marbury, who just would not fly in today's NBA. Allen Iverson, another one. Guys that just wouldn't work. And they played beautiful team basketball.
Yeah, a lot of people actually compare this team to like the modern day Golden State Warriors, which I think's a bit of a stretch for sure.
That is more than
it's
a bit
huge
of a stretch. I was going to say like the Spurs, maybe. I think that's a better comp.
Okay, that's fair. But the point is, they shared the basketball. They had multiple guys who could pass. And basically everyone was a playmaker on this team. They didn't just play through one guy. It was a team effort, top to bottom. So now let's talk about the 2002 playoffs. The Kings get the first seed, and like I said, the 8th seed was the Jazz. I always think it's so funny looking back, the early 2000s. The Utah Jazz, like John Stockton and Karl Malone, were trying so hard to still get that ring.
You know, we give the Blazers a lot of for hanging in too long with the Dave and CJ pairing. The Jazz hung in way too long with the Stockton and Malone pairing.
Kings won this in 4 games, and yes, they won it in 4 games. They won 3 games, lost 1. This was the last year of the first round being a 5-game series. At one point, the series was tied 1-1, but then the Kings just won the next 3 games. And every game was decided by 7 points or less.
Forget the fact these games were close. No team scored over 100 in any game. That is just peak early 2000s basketball. I love it.
And then the second round, they played the Dallas Mavericks, and this was that Steve Nash, Dirk Nowitzki Dallas Mavericks, insanely good offense, not really good on defense. And again, the Kings were tied 1-1 at one point in the series, but then they just take over and end up winning the series in 5.
That's what the best team in the league does. And your point about the Nash Dirk Mavs, I'm all-time offense, all-time defense. Though.
Yeah, Peja, he injured his ankle in game 3, but the rest of the team stepped up, and Chris Webber, he was a beast in the series, kind of owned Dirk. 25 points a game, 10 rebounds, was insanely efficient, and that brought them to the conference finals, ready to play the Lakers, the team that beat them the previous 2 years.
Oh boy. Yeah, this series. This series has kind of been talked to death. We'll go through it though. There's not a whole lot to say until we get to a certain game 6. But game 1, Lakers win on the road. Kobe dropped 30, was just torching Doug Christie. Kings came back, won game 2. Fine, you split 1-1. Game 3 though, a rout for the Kings.
Yeah, this was crazy. I didn't even know this until I was looking up this game. They were up 75-52 at half, and the Lakers, the 2-time defending champion Los Angeles Lakers, were getting booed in Staples Center.
And once again, the Lakers hearing the sentiments from the home crowd.
I feel like that's kind of harsh. Like,
I also agree. I was trying to, pathetic was not the word I was looking for, but harsh I think is it. Like,
yeah.
Coming off 2 titles, the series is tied 1-1, and yes, they played a bad half, an awful half actually, but booing down 23 at halftime, harsh to me.
And they did kind of close the deficit in the second half, but Kings retook home court. Huge win for them to put them up 2-1. And game 4, at least the start of the game, was kind of the same. They were up 22 in the second quarter, and the Lakers were getting booed again.
Away at the lead. They got it down to single digits, and then Robert Horry. First of all, why is he at the 3-point line? Why is he not in the paint rebounding?
I hate this play so much because it doesn't make any sense. Kobe drives to the basket. He misses. I think Shaq tries to tip it back in.
He misses.
Yeah, Vlade Divac punches it out, and then it just drops to Robert Horry like out of a Disney movie. Like the last shot drops to the kid who barely made the team.
Camera pans to everyone in the audience,
Yeah, exactly.
like just with these looks of wonder on their face, like, is he gonna do it?
And of course he just drains a 3 and they win by 1. Like, I can't imagine being a Kings fan, how heartbreaking that had to be.
You know what I find so funny about this shot is the interviews after the game. Vlade is just there like, oh, that's just a lucky shot, you know? You shoot it sometimes and it goes in. And one of the reporters with Robert Horry came and told about that. And Robert Horry's like, he needs to go read a paper or something. Like, that's what I do. I'm like, damn.
I mean, to be fair, he's not wrong. Robert Horry just had that knack for always hitting big jumpers. I don't know how. Credit to the Kings though, because they bounced back, come back for game 5, and Mike Bibby hit a huge game winner. And Kings fans were probably like, okay, we just need to win 1 game. We're 1 game away from the NBA Finals. We got 2 games to do it. We got this.
And then David Stern stepped in.
David Stern said, no, you guys don't. I am not allowing a Kings versus Nets Finals.
Oh, that would have, that's getting like 5 million viewers a game.
Yeah, nobody is watching that.
That's ratings disaster for the NBA.
And this, obviously, the most controversial game in NBA history.
Oh yeah, it's not close.
Yeah, go back and look at some of the calls. It is just, it's disgusting, to be honest.
I'm not much of a sports conspiracy theorist. Like, I don't really think that the 1985 draft lottery was rigged.
What is the Kings were blessed with played at the top of the key. It was easy for Bibby to use them as screens and navigate them as he does here, and he nails a pull-up J. This double drag screen is very tough to defend, and here Bibby could hit Webber on top of the pass, or here find Doug Christie in the corner for an open 3. And they know what to do for every situation. So here on the double drag screen, Robert Ory will come out and hedge high, so Vlade immediately knows to slip right to the basket, get it, and deliver a nice pass to Weber. Beautiful. Deliver a nice pass to Weber. Beautiful. And deliver a nice pass to Weber. And deliver a nice pass to Weber. Beautiful. The Kings also ran high post splits, so here watch how they get it to Weber, and all three guards will cut with a purpose around him, making it really a hassle to defend. Weber stays patient, Bibby gets free, cash. Hassle to defend, Weber stays patient, Bibby gets free. Really a hassle to defend, Weber really a hassle to post splits. So here watch how they get it to Weber, and all three guards will cut with a purpose around him, making it really a hassle to defend. Weber stays patient, Bibby gets free, cash. Same split with Vlade doing the playmaking, and when no one's open, he's skilled enough to take Shaq right to the post and make a nice shot inside. This time Weber catches it on top but is pressured hard, so he simply drives past the defender and draws a foul.